Hey guys, it's me Gavin here. Welcome back to the workbench. Today I have a pretty special video. I'm going to be showing you guys how to weather, or my techniques on how I weather a Microtrains 3-bay hopper car. In this video I will show you exactly what techniques I use and the materials I use to do so. So let's get into that. So the first steps I always take to weathering any car is first washing it. Let me see if you can get it. Washing it with some acrylic paint. You can use oils, whatever. I find that acrylic paint really does the job well because it sticks to the car and you're able to move along faster in the process. So what I have here is Elephant Gray by Apple Barrel. I got this at Walmart. And I already did the other side, if you can see here, but I'm going to do the back side, and all you're going to need is a pretty medium-sized brush, and we want to get this done relatively quick, but we do want to take our time. So what we're going to do is we want to go, let me see if that's in the shot, let me move over. All we're going to do is we're going to take the wash, and we're going to go over the entire car, just with some base acrylic. You want a pretty good amount of water to paint ratio, not a whole lot, but enough that is going to not necessarily stick to the car, but is going to hold. Well, you can modify that paint. And that's the key to this process here, is being able to move this wash around. So all I'm going to do, I've gotten a smaller brush, and all I'm going to do is just clean up that acrylic paint. We don't want to take all of it off, but we do want to eliminate a lot of that paint. So after I'm done, I'm going to show you what we do next. These first steps are very crucial in creating the canvas that we apply all of our weathering to later on in the video. A lot of people skip over this step because they don't really find it necessary, but this is one of the most important steps, if not the most important step, in setting up your model to create more of a 3D look and a more realistic look by eliminating that shine that comes from the factory and giving it a more 3D dimensional model look. The next step that I do is some airbrush work. Now I'm going to show a picture of the model that I am trying to recreate, and I'm not going for necessarily an identical model, but something close. So I'm going to be using my airbrush and these Vallejo airbrush paint colors. Now, I haven't picked out the ones that I'm going to be using yet, but I'm going to use this greenish gray on the top to kind of get that moldy sort of old grain hopper look. You see this on a lot of older grain hoppers that are on the road for a long time. Grain spillage on top of these, on the roof, basically starts to mold over time, and along with the rust, it creates this very dark and dirty look. Now I'm going to be using a different couple of techniques to get that look a little bit closer to the prototype, but what we first start off with is some greenish gray paint. Now for the bottom, I'm going to be using a little bit of a lighter color. I'm going to be using this medium gray, which is almost a tannish color, along with some burnt umber to get some of that grime underneath the bottom of the car. So I'm going to go set up the airbrush, and I'm going to show you how and where I apply the paints. So the first color I'm going to be using is the green gray. And I'm going to be using this on the top of the car. So what I'm just going to use, I'm going to test out the airbrush. It is a little loud, sorry about that, but I'm going to go lightly over the top of the car. Again, just try to get that look down. I'm pretty happy with that. And again, we don't need that much paint because we are going to use and create that effect with some pastels. Now the next color I used was the light gray, and if you can see, this car already looks pretty good. And we haven't even gotten to the actual weathering part of this video yet. A lot of this is just some basic airbrush techniques. And then the last color I'm going to be using is this darker burnt umber. Now we have to use this very, very modestly. We do not want to go over the car too much. I'm basically going to be focusing on the bottom of this hopper car with this color, and we do not want to go too crazy just because of how dark it is. So let's get into that. So the next step in the weathering process is using some chalks. Now I know modelers tend to use chalks later on in their weathering process, but for me, I like to use sort of a chalky wash, I should say. I'm just mixing up some pan pastels in this little cup thingy, and I'm using again a fine brush, and all I'm going to do is, sorry, I didn't mean to hit the camera, this is kind of difficult. You see the grooves on the top of the walkway? That's where most of the rust forms on a lot of hopper cars. So we're going to try and highlight that just basically by kind of pulling down this sort of chalkiness concoction, and it's just water and chalk, and all I'm doing is kind of just pulling it down and creating, it's not going to look too good, and we're not trying to create streaks yet. You'll see where I'm going with this, but all I'm doing is basically just trying to create a palette for where I want some of the deepest rust to be. And now it looks kind of crappy. I mean, this doesn't look great, but you have to trust the process. Now I'm going to get some more chalk, and I'm just going to kind of define, again, just keep going down where you want some of that, most of that chalk to be. It doesn't have to be, you can do it as heavy or as light as you want. But remember, the chalk kind of changes color when you apply water. So just be mind of that. So again, you're just gonna try, this is just very base weathering. We are going to be going over this with a lot of paint washes. But this is just to get kind of the base outline of your car. And you can start to see where and how this is starting to shape out. I mean, it's not too crazy, but you can start to see exactly if I move my hand out of the way, you can start to see that when I have some water and I start applying it, I'm able to move that chalk. Now I'm going to grab I'm gonna grab a little bit of a thicker brush, and again I'm gonna get this brush right here, and I'm going to get some water at the very tip of the brush, and I'm going to go to the car and I'm just going to work with this chalk. Now that may be a little bit too much chalk, or too much water for the chalk. But you'll start to see what starts happening here. We don't want it's not too defined. And we're laying a blueprint out for the future weathering that we're going to do with some paint. But we just want to have a rough outline of exactly where this stuff is going to be on the car. Again, I guess you can use this technique for very light rust weathering. Again, it's very versatile for a lot of different types of weathering. But for here, I'm kind of using it as sort of a base color of rust. Now I'm going in with some more, and even when you start really working and really trying to make this look not better, but more realistic with the streaks and getting them to look more pronounced. You can even use this as a very, very, very early sort of rust stage weathering effect. I myself have used this before. I am sure I am not the only one that has used this. I've got, I know there's Dan over at Dan's Railroad. I believe that's his channel. I'll put a link down in my description. He did a tutorial, a way better in-depth tutorial on doing this kind of stuff. But again, I'm doing this on N scale. He did it on HO. It's it's very versatile. You can use this stuff on any scale, and it works. It works. It's proven to work. So it's just an amazing technique that we can use as modelers to get this effect on the car. So you can just start to see where I'm at here. And this is a very rough outline. This is the second side that I've done. If you kind of want to see, I'll give you a sneak peek as to where this car is going. This is the other side of the car. So we can see exactly what we're doing here with the techniques and where it will be leading to. But you just have to work with it. Again, just try to work with the chalks. Again, this is very optional. You can do this with some paint, but I like how the chalks give the car sort of another texture, and it makes it a little more realistic to do. So I'm gonna let that sit, and I'm gonna dry and let it sit and dry, and I'm gonna get the paints ready for the next process. So what I'm using for acrylic paints, not airbrush paints, I'm using Anatomy acrylic, and this is burnt sienna. Great early rust, or not early, but newer rust color. I have something of a mixing bowl. This is just some Tupperware that I cut up. And after this dries, I'm gonna show you exactly what we do next. Now that we finished the roof area right here, there's a couple spots that I want to mention. Like up in this corner right here, we can go in and we can refine some of this weathering. So I'm gonna go over this again, and it should give a better effect. It's the same effect that I have been using for the entire roof, but again, all we have to do is just go and refine this car. But I'm going to let that dry, and then the next part, before we go any further, on this car I'm going to do some graffiti. Now I'm not going to show exactly, I'm going to show you the graffiti, but I'm not going to go into detail and just kind of explain everything. I'm going to do the graffiti, and then I'm going to show you how to weather over the graffiti. If you guys are interested in how I do my graffiti, I will post another video showing you and explaining to you guys how I hand paint my graffiti on N-scale cars. But before we go on to the next step, I'm going to add some graffiti to this car, and then we are going to weather over that. So after about an hour, I've got the first patch on. This is going to be the patch underneath most of the weathering. And there'll be another patch over it as well. So I'm going to weather over this tag, and the first step to weathering over this is just using the same exact color, this burnt sienna, to start creating some of these streaks down the car body. I'm going to mix up some more paint. Again, you want this to be pretty thin in order to get basically some streaks down. And all I'm going to do again is just look where we look where those marks are. And we're just gonna go all the way down the car, and you'll see as soon as we start working, and as soon as I start to get deeper into this weathering, exactly where and how I do this. So let me continue to weather this side of the car, and I'll check back with you in a little bit. Now that I have most of the streaking done, I'm gonna go in and create some of the rust pittings near the streaking on the car and up towards the top of the roof. On the other side, you can see what I mean with, sorry about that, with some of the pitting near the streaking. So I'm going to recreate that on this side, again with just a fine tip brush, and I'm just going to go, actually I'll probably use this one. And again, I'm just going to take some of my burnt sienna, and I'm just going to go, let's see if you can see, just going to kind of go where that streaking is and just kind of create some pitting. So as soon as I have that done, I'll update you guys. And it's pretty easy. Again, all you have to do is get a pretty short fine tip brush, get some paint, and then just go on top of the streaking and just kind of tap it nice and light. Just tap it around there, and you should get a pretty nice effect. So after we completed most of the pitting and the streaking on the car, I'm going to go in with some Anatomy acrylic raw umber, and I'm going to use this as the darker, more, I guess, aged rust. And all I'm going to do, this rust is going to mainly focus on top of the car. So again, the exact same technique that we used for the lighter raw sienna, or burnt sienna, my bad. We're just going to go in and we're going to do that on the car as well. And then just blending that in with the rust that we already have there. Now after multiple coats of that raw umber, you can see the effect it has on the weathering and how well it blends in with the older rust. Now I'm going to add the second graffiti tag, and after that we're going to start working on the roof. Now that we finished the second graffiti tag, we can see how much detail and time that took. Roughly almost 2 hours to get that painted on there. Really challenging, to say the least. It was really hard, just because I couldn't figure out what I was missing. But I finally figured out what I needed to do to get that to look as realistic as possible, and I got it done. So now we're going to start working on the roof here. This roof is going to be pretty rusted up. We're going to use the same techniques we've been using all along the side of the car. And we're just going to get some burnt sienna. And all we're going to do is go over the top of the car, just like what we've been doing before. Get some water and just slowly start to apply this rust color, if you can see what I'm doing. Now we'll work around the what are they called? The walkways on top, the walkway treads for now, but we will go back and weather those separately. But it's just easier for us, or easier for me to tackle one thing at a time, and slowly we'll work up to weathering those walkway treads. But I'm going to finish the roof again, just using the same techniques we talked about earlier, and we're going to put that acrylic paint all on the top of the roof. It's the next day now, and I've let all of the acrylic and the paint sit overnight. Now we're going to use some raw umber, again the same application we used before, and I'm just going to apply that to the top of the roof, and then after that I'll be using some chalks, and we'll finish this car up. So I have just watered down and created another wash with the burnt umber, or the raw umber, my bad. And it gives it a pretty good effect, as you can tell, on the top of the roof. It looks really good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get some black chalk. Sorry about the airbrush, I was using it. I'm going to get some black chalk. Let me find my brush. And I'm gonna get my brush a little bit wet. And I'm gonna get some chalk out of my little disc there, and I'm gonna get it. And I'm just gonna kind of go over kind of where I think some of that moldy sort of buildup is gonna be, and this creates a pretty neat effect on top of these older hopper cars that were used in aggregate service. This one being really worn down and used will have this pretty apparent on the top of their car. I'm just gonna wash away some of the oopsies that I made on the walkway treads. But after that, we're done with this car for the weathering part. Actually, I need to patch out the old number, and I'm going to put a decal of the new number that is pretty realistic to the prototypes of these cars. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a fine brush, and I'm going to get my gray, mix it up a little bit, and we're just going to hand patch out, because a lot of these are just spray painted out, and hand patching it out on such a small model gives it the same effect. So I'm just going to get I can't really show this on camera too well just because I have to be really precise with it. But I'm just going to patch out the number, and I'm going to dull coat this car, and then it will be ready for the decals. Now you kind of want to go over this. I kind of did it in a kind of first go over, but take your time. If you're not really used to patching out stuff, it can take a while, but just remember, if it looks a little wonky, that's the point. These cars usually aren't professionally painted over. They're usually just some guy with a bucket of paint or some spray cans that just go over that, just kind of eliminate that older number. So as soon as we let that paint dry, I'm going to dull coat the entire model, and then we'll apply the decals. Alright, so I have just applied the decals to the car. As you can see here, I put the numbers on there. And a technique that I like to use on some cars, not all cars, because it kind of looks, it'll look monotonous if you do it too much. I use number board decal sheets. And this gives sort of like a second dimension, or sort of another layer to this patch out, because the numbers are see-through on that decal. So whatever color you paint on the back, it will show through, and that will be the color of the numbers. It is a really cool effect if you're trying to get multi-patch number board, or multi-patched, what am I trying to say? Multi-patched, patched out numbers, which you can find on a lot of older cars, which I have tried to represent here. And I'm really happy with how this car turned out. It was kind of a struggle at first, trying to figure out what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. But this is a rust bucket car, and the cars that I really like to do. So I hope this video is pretty informational for you guys. If you want me to go into any detail on some of the techniques specifically, I can do videos on them individually. Just let me know, and I will do my best to create those. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you had a blast watching it. I had a blast making it, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you guys.